Hi guys, this is gsno.com and I'm here with the review of the Nokia X30 5G. It's been a while since we last tested a Nokia phone. It's a mid-range handset with a Snapdragon 695 CPU, and at the same time we handled it at IFA 2022 in Berlin last fall. Priced at around $400, it adopts some of the Nokia identity and also gives us a price. The main camera is the same one from the Galaxy S22, albeit only with Full HD capture on account of the capacity of the CPU. Now this phone here prides itself in being very eco-friendly, meaning it has a lot of recycled materials both in its box and the materials it uses. Okay, so let's get going. First things first, let's talk about the design. So if you're going for measurements, it measures 8mm in thickness and weighs a decent 185 grams. The metal you see here is 100% recycled aluminum, as is the frame, 100% recycled aluminum. The backside is about 64% recycled plastic, and the cardboard box that the device came in is also recycled. Now the handset comes in two hues. This is one that is supposed to be a mixture. It's basically cloudy blue, although I see it as sort of gray. There's also ice white. The phone comes with 3 years of warranty. It sits pretty nice in my hand on account of the flat frame, which helps with the grip. It's very solidly built, and I have to say I'm not complaining about the thickness of the bezels. They're fine, and also the punch hole isn't that big. It has IP67 certification, taking some dust and water, and once again, zero objections. I love the personality of the camera, finally a camera that looks slightly different on account of this small step it takes, like a set of stairs, a very small set of stairs descending from the sensors to this area here. Anyway, so that's about it. I'm happy with the design, finally, and let's talk about the screen now. Obviously, nowadays, it's all about that AMOLED. I would say it's a smaller than usual diagonal, 6.43 inches, and I should probably also mention the Full HD resolution and the 90 Hz refresh rate. The bezels, I would call them mid-size, especially if you look at the chin, although overall they're at least symmetrical. Now the actual viewing experience will be handled via our usual test clip, so it's a bit of a landmark. Let's go full screen now. As you can see, zero problems with the punch hole, with the size of the bezels, and I have to say I'm pretty impressed. It's a bright and crisp screen with vivid colors, also wide view angles, as you can see for yourself, and the contrast is fine. I even caught some sunny days in December to confirm that. It remains legible in the sunlight. The white is pure, the black is deep, and the pixels have a pentile matrix arrangement. Now when it comes to the brightness, we measure that and achieve the satisfying 559 lux units. It's a quite solid result, and if you want comparisons, well, it's superior to the OnePlus Nord 2T and the Vivo V23 5G. It's still inferior to the Honor 70 and the Nothing Phone 1. Now we go further and we go deep inside the phone, trying to find its hardcore specs, starting with the CPU, in this case a Qualcomm Snapdragon 695 5G, 6nm octa-core, also present on the Realme 10 Pro and Honor Magic 4 Lite and the Sony Xperia 10 Mark IV. It's accompanied by 6 gigs of RAM, there's also a version with 8, and by 128 GB of storage, there's also a version with 256. Sadly, this is UFS 2.2, and the one with 256 offers UFS 3.0. We don't have a micro SD card slot here, but we do have a very fluid experience, and the device runs like a champ, so I didn't notice any sort of stutter in the day-to-day use or in gaming or anything like that, so it's quite fluid, maybe on account of the stock software. Now, if you want benchmarks, we got them, and by the way, games can run just fine, although Snapdragon 695 will become obsolete in about half a year or 1 year if you want truly hardcore games. In Antutu 9, here's the score we achieved, just above Oppo Reno 7 Lite, and at the same time we surpassed the Honor Magic 4 Lite and the Poco N4 Pro. We're below the OnePlus Nord CE2 Lite and the Moto G82, as well as the Galaxy A53. A more relevant test is the Geekbench 5 multi-core subtest. Here we are beating phones from 2 years ago, Galaxy A52, Xiaomi Mi 10 Lite, but also the Galaxy A53. However, we're below the Motorola Moto G82 and the Vivo X80 Lite. When it comes to gaming, I'm going to leave it to 3D Mark Slingshot Extreme ES 3.1. Now here we are, just above the Honor Magic 4 Lite, Moto G60 and the good old Huawei P20 Pro. It's more relevant that we've beaten the Galaxy A53 yet again, but we are below the OnePlus Nord CE2 Lite and the Moto G82. So these names constantly pop up. Every once in a while you'll see a phone which is $100 or $200 cheaper beating this handset. Definitely not a heavy hitter. I would have preferred a Snapdragon 7 series CPU here, to be honest. Now, if you want to talk about the temperature, we achieved 31.3 degrees Celsius in benchmarks, which is excellent, and 33.5 degrees Celsius in games. It's totally foreign when it comes to overheating, so zero problems in that regard. Now the battery may scare some people, 4200 mAh. We're accustomed to 4500, 5000 mAh nowadays, but we've seen Motorola performing with such low capacities. Let's see if Nokia can also do it. By the way, this battery charges at 33 watts, and we do not have a charger in the box. Now, we did a continuous video playback test, basically a binging test, and achieved a satisfying time of 20 hours and 8 minutes of video playback. It's an excellent result, superior to the Vivo V23, Motorola X30 and Galaxy A53. It's below the Vivo V21, the Realme 9 Pro Plus and the OnePlus Nord CE2 Lite. Even more relevant is the continuous usage test. Here we are with 15 hours and 14 minutes. This is a great result, superior to the Vivo X80 Lite, the Moto G82 and the OnePlus Nord 2T. It is below the Moto G52 and the Redmi Note 11 Pro 5G. Now we can talk about the charging, and as you can see here, it requires 1 hour and 13 minutes to go from 0 to 100%. It's not very impressive, but at least after 30 minutes you're at 70%, which is actually quite decent. There are also power saving features, and now that we're done with the battery, it's time to discuss the acoustics. The Nokia X30 only has a singular speaker at the bottom, has 3 microphones, 1 here and 2 at the top, doesn't have audio jack, and once again, sadly, there are no stereo speakers. So let's put the button speaker to the test with this copyright-free tune. Okay, so you get a gist of it. It's not the loudest speaker I've heard in the world, but it's still pretty crisp. Even at top volume, there was no distortion, which is a good thing. I particularly enjoyed the highs and the voices, but the bass was also quite decent. Very good guitars in heavy metal songs and rock songs in general. I would say it's quite fine, and it's not treble heavy. So let's actually see the results we achieved here with a decibel meter. We have first the acoustic sample test, and we achieved 88.7 decibels, placing us in the top 100 phones. And as you can see here, we're beating some heavy hitters with this 88.7 decibels. Let's see some of them. So we're just above the Xiaomi Mi 11 Ultra, and also we're beating the Redmi Note 11 and the likes of the Moto G30 and the Huawei Nova 9. So that's about it. These are the handsets we're surpassing, as well as the Huawei Nova 9 SE and the Oppo Reno 7 Lite. However, there are some other phones which have a superior score in this test. For example, the Moto G60s, the Moto G52, which is a bit more recent, and also the, let's see here, Realme 9i 5G, which is also quite recent. When it comes to games, I'm actually satisfied by the 100.1 decibels achieved here. We're very close to the Galaxy A52, which had a similar value. Let's see which other handsets we actually surpassed. I see that we beat the OnePlus Nord 2T, Moto G82, and Poco X3, which is fine for me. At the same time, we scored below some pretty famous other handsets, like let's take for example the older Nokia 6.2, which was pretty impressive back in the day, or maybe the Nokia 7.2, as well as the Realme 8 5G and the Honor 70, if we're sticking around the $400-500 range. Okay, we're about done with the acoustics, and when it comes to the camera, the front one is in a small punch hole. It's a 16 megapixel shooter with an OmniVision sensor. If you go to the backside, it tells a more interesting story. Beside the LED flash here, we have the main 50 megapixel camera with a Samsung GN5 sensor, which is the same one that the Galaxy S22 has. This time with f1.9 aperture, while the Galaxy S22 has f1.8. The other camera is a 13 megapixel ultra wide shooter. You've seen, I'm pretty sure, all the camera options in the unboxing. I should probably also mention that we are limited only to Full HD video capture, sadly. That's all we can do, Full HD 30 or 60 frames per second. Now, let me start off with these shots, which are actually the last ones in the gallery. I'm very impressed by the close-ups that the camera is able to take. Look at the texture, look at the details, so close-ups are taken in a very nice fashion. I'm also particularly impressed by the reds and the blues achieved by this phone. So that's also nice. And when I say close-ups, I don't only mean plastic objects, I also mean flowers with a lot of detail. You can tell it's a sensor with a pretty high pedigree that we have here. So we have established that our close-ups are just fine here. Another thing that the camera excels at are actually, honestly, selfies. I know they're a bit contrasty and they're a bit gray, at least in this view or in this placement compared to the sun position. But I have to say I'm happy with the result when it comes to the texture and the details. I had very small expectations from this 16 megapixel sensor and honestly delivered. Also the bokeh is pretty adept at cutting me from the background. So selfie camera is a pleasant surprise, the close-ups are fine, colors aren't half bad, but let's talk more about it. Okay, so let's see what we have here. So this is a regular camera shot and it's the same frame but with ultra wide. There are some limitations for the ultra wide camera, the lack of details, and honestly I feel that the main camera is sometimes too bright compared to the more tempered ultra wide, which I actually prefer because it keeps the colors in check a little bit. Every once in a while the sky is white and there are some mist shots as you just saw before, but there aren't many of them. Okay, so once again, nice colors here. Maybe there's also some magic happening thanks to Google Photos and its AI. So not much to object color-wise and detail-wise, maybe except for the ultra-wide shooter. This is a bokeh, this time with the main camera, a slight miss here at the top of the statue, and another one here with a better cut behind the subject. Of course, you can leave all the thoughts of a solid zoom behind. This is what happens with the zoom. There's a lot of noise, even at just 2x. So all in all, I would say that this device is able to compete in its best moments with the Honor 70, and in its worst, I would say it goes in the area of the Galaxy A52 or A52s. I would actually place it above the Realme 9 Pro Plus, believe it or not, which was pretty solid in the same price range with a similar CPU. These have been daytime shots, and let's see the low light shots. I'm honestly not that impressed by the low light shots unless you activate the night mode. So there are a lot of purple flares here. This is just not a rare occurrence. Purple flare there, purple flare here, and it still pops up every once in a while. Of course, the ultra-wide shots have deformed lights and a lot of noise, so you best stay clear. Of course, the zoom doesn't impress, there's no telephoto camera, but if you want to get things going, activate the night mode and you'll be happy with the achievement, with the lighting, with the colors, with the size of the lights, and the distribution of the shade and the light in your shot. But beware of those purple flares. The fact that you can see here the LEDs of the logo is a big win. There were some flagships last year which couldn't achieve that. One example being the Xperia 5.4, if I remember correctly. Okay, so that's that. If you stick to the night mode, it's quite a decent mid-ranger, but still, it does show its limitations at a mid-range phone. You cannot basically confuse it with a flagship. Now, let's talk about the video. Okay, so let's discuss the videos now. We have an app here and there are 18 of them. Sadly, as I mentioned before, we're just limited to Full HD in 30 or 60 frames per second. So there you have it. I mean, you can tell for yourself that the brightness is pretty high, bordering on overexposure in some areas of the vegetation. However, the colors are a bit mute here, they're a bit colder than usual. HMD is going for realism this time around. The panning is quite fine, I didn't feel any overbearing type of, let's say, stabilization. And here you can see a sample of zoom. It's a pretty fluid zoom experience, although the details drop pretty fast. We are working with a mid-range phone after all. And then we got this video here. It's just one of the many stabilization tests. This is the stabilization test without any special mode activated, and you can see it's quite jiggly. Then we have the steady mode. You can already feel an improvement. And then we have the ultra steady mode, which is this one here. It feels more noisy and darker. And actually I have a feeling it's filmed with the ultra-wide camera on account of the curvature of the image. My favorite one was the regular steady mode. Here you can see some colors, once again a bit muted and a bit cold for my taste. And the sky is a bit white in the background. Once again, as far as Full HD goes, it's quite satisfying. However, it's worrying me that such quality can also be found on $200 or $250 phones. So keep that in mind. And of course, I tried out the selfie camera, which is not as impressive as the photo selfies were. But there's also an extra feature which stabilizes the selfie video and sadly increases the quantity of noise. Finally, one of the videos which I really want to show you is a sort of hyperlapse, basically something like this. You can change the speed, you can set it to a very high speed or regular speed as you start filming around the park. They call it speed warp, I call it hyperlapse, I've seen it before, quite interesting, but still rather noisy. These are daytime videos, and once again, as far as Full HD goes, it's quite decent, and this is the low light video, which frankly, it's nothing to write home about. Lights are too big, too much darkness, a lot of noise, quite shaky, and feels more like a mid-range or even low mid-range. So that's about it as far as the camera is concerned. I should also probably mention that I was hugely impressed by the microphones, which did a fine job at isolating my voice from the wind and the noises around. The handset you're seeing right here, it's a dual nano SIM setup, but you can also have a setup with a nano SIM and an eSIM. You get 5G connectivity, you get Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.1, sadly, no trace of 5.2, GPS, GLONASS, Galileo, BDS and NFC. There's an USB-C 2.0 port at the bottom and even the good old FM radio. Let me confirm that for you. We have the radio right about here. FM radio available on the handset. Okay, moving forward, the calls are pretty loud and clear. I would have expected nothing less from the first company who had a GSM phone on the market in the 90s. And the speed test, we also have that, with a bit of a disappointment, and I'll tell you immediately why. Since on paper we have a Wi-Fi 6 phone, I expected higher results in the Wi-Fi department, but we only got to something like 350 megapixel downloads and 299 megapixel uploads. Expected higher. Wi-Fi 6 can even mean 800 megapixel. 5G was actually quite solid, 399 over 20.1 megapixel. Now, as far as the software is concerned, judging by Nokia's reputation, I would have expected to receive a clean Android 13 by now. We're stuck with Android 12 and the Android One initiative, plus the promise of 3 years of updates. As you can see, I'm using gestures to navigate and multitask. We have the drop-down section with all the famous pills for the quick settings. It's a pretty stock experience, similar to the Motorola one and the Google Pixel one. The leftmost feed is dedicated to the Google News. And if you keep the screen pressed or pinch it, you're treated to the home settings, as well as the widgets, which are of course stock and good looking, obviously not as good looking as the stacked ones from the One UI experience on the Android 13. And here you can get your wallpaper colors, you can extract them and apply them to your icons and also your menus, color combinations taken from here, as you can see for yourself. Okay, now as far as the rest of the experience is concerned, the security is taken care of by this fingerprint scanner, which is, I would say, decent, not the fastest in the world, but still decently accurate. And if you want to see more settings, we got connectivity ones, apps, battery, storage, wallpaper and style, accessibility, and of course security, including these ones. And you can even have face unlock if you want to, aside from the fingerprint. There's also digital well-being and parental control. Plus, of course, in the privacy department, you can find the privacy dashboard and the resources access, plus that small icon you can see on the screen when you're using the front camera, microphone and other resources for the sake of privacy. Not many pre-installed apps, so for some reason we have installed ExpressVPN, for some other reason we have a GoPro Quick, we have Netflix, we have Spotify, and the classic Google package plus LinkedIn. Okay, so in a nutshell, that's about it as far as the Nokia X30 is concerned. Now let me take you to our website as I start listing the pros and cons regarding this handset. Okay, so on the pro side, the Nokia X30 is a good looking phone which is well built. It's got a bright screen, as you probably saw throughout this review. It's got a pretty okay performance, it's a foreigner to lag, and I'm actually decently happy with the stock interface and 3 years of updates. Now, the battery life was actually surprising, coming from a few mid-range Nokia phones which were disappointing, and the microphones were very solid when filming. Stabilization was fine in my book if you keep the steady option on. I'm happy with the main camera and the colors and clarity, and also happy with the night mode. Selfies were another surprise which I registered from this handset, and I should probably also mention the fact that the speaker at the bottom delivers, even though it's on its own, no stereo. And of course that eco-friendly thing with the recycled metal and plastic are welcome. All in all, it's a pretty well-made phone, and I think it's time to also address the cons, since those were the pros, which you just heard before. Now, as far as the cons are concerned, it's a pricey phone in the end. It doesn't have 4K video capture, doesn't have micro SD, doesn't have a charger inside the box. You're only stuck to UFS 2.2 storage if you get the lower storage version, and it's not exactly future-proof on account of the CPU. Charging is a bit slow, and I'm actually unhappy that we didn't get the Android 13 update yet. No stereo speakers and not a very satisfying speed for the Wi-Fi 6 should also be mentioned, as well as the fact that the nighttime filming and the nighttime photos are nothing to write home about if you don't have the night mode activated. So, in the end, you're going to easily buy it for probably the combo of battery and screen. Those two I have zero objections. Next up, there's the cute design, tribute to the older Nokias, and if I'm being honest, the main camera is quite solid, although not exactly on par with the Galaxy S22 one, even though it's the same sensor. I would also mention the clean OS as a pro, and the selfies and night mode photos as nice surprises. However, a correct price would have been something like $250 or $300, definitely not $400. So, it's good for selfies, battery, screen, medium level gaming, and photos with the main camera, particularly with the night mode activated and some decent stabilization. That's it from us. This has been JasonRon.com and a review of the Nokia X30 5G. Goodbye.